Today we are going to go over how to add watercolor markers to our sketchbook covers. First thing we're going to need is we are going to need our cover all outlined in black Sharpie. We're going to need a container of water filled up to the water line, which is this line right here, paper towel, a brush, a color wheel, and a set of watercolor markers. There are two sets of watercolor markers, one that looks like this, and then there's another type that has a dark cover. Either one works the same exact way. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some color. The colors that we're going to be using on our sketchbook. We can use any color we want on our sketchbooks, but one thing I want you to pay attention to is the use of complementary colors. Complementary colors, if you look at the back of right here, a complementary color lies directly across from each other on the color wheel. Mix a color with its complement, grays or neutralizes the color. Place the color next to its complement and it will add visual interest. So the way you find them on the color wheel is they are colors that are across from each other, opposites. So yellow and violet are complementary colors, red and green, orange and blue. So what I want you to do is I would like you to use these sets of colors throughout your picture. So if you have something that has some kind of pattern, whether it be stripes, whether it be something like this, you could use one of the complementary colors. So maybe I color some in blue, maybe I color some in orange, and I use blue and orange for this whole section to create a little bit of visual interest using the complementary colors. Maybe I use the complementary colors here by every other line. Maybe I use red, maybe I use green, and alternate the colors to create visual interest. So I want you to keep remembering to use complementary colors, colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. All right, so to the markers, let's talk about two colors. I'm going to use my complementary colors, orange and blue, to create some color over here, and I'm going to show you how to use the watercolor markers. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. And we're going to get our water handy, and we're going to get our markers. There are two tips to the markers. There is a brush tip, which is fatter, and then there is a very skinny tip. I like to use the brush tip. It's up to you. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to kind of go over the very edge of my shape. I'm going to color these in. And what I want you to do is you're going to color in multiples. Don't color one in and then start to use the watercolors. I would like you to color in a few. So sit there and you're basically going to almost outline your shapes using the watercolor markers. You do want to make sure that you lay down a good amount of marker. If you don't lay down enough marker, then it's not going to work effectively. So I'm going to lay down my oranges. I'm going to keep laying them down, and it doesn't matter you know, your colors. Right here I'm using the complementary colors. I'd like you to use the complementary colors in your project somewhere. Now what we're going to do is we are going to take a brush. We're going to wet the brush. Always wipe it on the side so there's not a lot of water. If you get too much water, you could use your paper towel on the side and dab dab. Okay. Then what you're going to do is you're going to wet the marker, and then you drag it in. Wet the marker and drag it in. And what happens is you're wetting the pigment of the marker and it's turning into watercolors. Okay, and I'd sit there and do all of the same color first so that you don't need to wash your brush. Wet the marker, drag it in, and it creates this really nice kind of visual interest with the watercolor markers. If you need to wash your brush, rinse it at the bottom. Okay, rub the brush on the bottom of the container and wipe it to the side. Then we're ready to use our next one, okay, which is the blue. It's a little lighter blue. It's really hard to see on the camera, but it's a very, very faint light blue. If you don't like how it looks, like say this is too light for you, you could always go back, excuse me, and use a darker color. Don't go over anything that's wet. So what I would let this stuff dry, and maybe I want to use this darker blue instead, like this. All right, so let's see what happens there. And you can always go color on top of this when it's dry. Oh, that one's so much better. I like that color better. I lighten it, and then I'm going to continue using the complementary colors of orange and blue. Maybe over in another section I would like to use another color. So for this I'm going to use some red, Okay, I'm going to continue here, and maybe I'm going to color in part of this red over here, and then I'm going to add some red here. I'm not going to color the whole thing in because then I don't need to. So I'm going to wipe it because it's a really skinny space, wet the marker, and drag it. And maybe behind here I add green. What you don't want to do is after you paint an area, you want to let it have time to dry. If you go and paint this right now green, it's going to bleed together and look really sloppy. So you really want to make sure that you take your time and let this stuff dry before you move on to a new area. Let's work with another colors just to show you maybe the yellows and the purples. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just color to one side of these to show you a little bit of gradation. Okay, a gradation is a color from light to dark. So if I add the marker to one side, oh, and there's the tip side. I don't like the tip side. If you prefer the tip side, go for it. I'm going to add purple all to this side right here. Okay, so I'm going to do one color at a time. Make sure you wash your brush, wipe it on the side. Okay, I'm going to do the yellow, so I'm going to wet the yellow, drag it, wet the yellow, drag it, drag it. You want to be real careful this time because now you really want to go and do the purple, but what's going to happen is it's going to bleed together because they're so close. So give it a couple minutes to dry. If you go back to this stuff over here, this stuff's already dry. Okay, you can see that the dark blue isn't dry yet, but the stuff dries, the watercolor markers dry really fast. So what you're going to do from now is you're going to continue on your cover of your sketchbook using the watercolor markers and using complementary colors throughout. You do not want to paint your hands. Leave those white because what's happening is your background is going to be completely colored, your hands are going to be white, and that creates contrast. So your hands will pop out as well as the colors that are over here. This is a little bit dry right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add the purple in here, semi-dry. Okay, so then you can continue working on your cover. Take your time, fill in the areas. If you mess up, let it dry, color on top, and continue. So you're going to color until your whole entire background is colored in using the watercolor markers and complementary colors. If you have any questions, please ask.